Awesome. Perfect. I really appreciate you guys coming out here. Now, before we get started, I just want to get a feel for the room. How many of you guys here work with students on a daily or semi-daily basis, either teaching lessons or have an academy or anything like that? Show of hands. Awesome. How many of you would find yourself in more of a head pro or an assistant pro position? Awesome. Any general managers? Anybody that I'm not thinking of? All right, so we got basically everybody covered. So that's great. That really gives me a good feel of who we're talking to so that we can tailor this presentation to you guys. And what we're going to be talking about today, I guess before we'll be back, did anybody come to my presentation a couple days ago, Wednesday, on the TPI stage? Was anybody there? Got a couple? Okay, awesome. So this will be great. This will be new information for most of you then. So what I want to talk about today is how we can incorporate mobility into your instruction programs and into your facilities to be able to increase the revenue that your instructors or your programs can have, and also have better member participation, getting players to play for a longer period of time, spending more time at your facilities, bringing in their families, moving better, feeling better, and everything that goes along that line. Now, what's really cool about being a PGA golf professional is, as a whole, as an industry, we have an opportunity to touch the lives of over 40 million people worldwide. And the number one reason that players leave this game is due to pain, especially back pain or injury, and any way that we can prevent that gives us more opportunity to affect their lives and have better relations with everybody. Now, I don't want this to come off as sounding audacious, but what we're going to talk about today, I like to think that I was born for this. Now this right here, coincidentally, this is a picture from the day I came home from the hospital, and it says Golf Pro right on the corner of the shirt there. I think it was a little ironic that it worked out that way. I got started the game pretty young and really took to it, and who would have thought that here I am several decades later following this passion, and who knows, maybe this was subconsciously put in my mind at a young age. So to give you a little background, so I did start playing when I was about 4 years old. I really took into the game. I played a lot, as much as I could. It was fun to chase the ball around, get to go play with my dad and with other family members and really spend that time out on the golf course. And what started to happen when I was around the age of 15, 16 in high school, I started playing probably the most golf in my career, and it was interesting how it happened. I started experiencing some back pain. And show of hands, who here experiences back pain or some kind of other pain when we play golf, before, after golf, and how many of you take ibuprofen or Aleve or anything like that? Awesome. Now, show of hands, how many of you have some kind of mobility program or implement stretching into your lives or have a routine or warm up? All right, not as many hands as people who have back pain or other kinds of pain. So I hope to change that conversation and give you guys some tools that can help you, because if you're experiencing it, I'm sure your players experience it. I'm sure you hear it all the time. So what happened was I was experiencing back pain, and what I found out was there was a way to change it. I was on an internship for the PGA back in 2011, and I was working with an assistant pro who had just gotten into CrossFit. And if we know anybody who's into CrossFit, all they talk about is CrossFit. So, absolutely, right? So what started happening was there was a day that there was kind of a lull in the shop. We had a couple extra minutes between tee times, and he pulls me in the back saying, Blaine, you gotta come check this out. There's this new, we'll call it a blog or a vlog online by Dr. Kelly Starrett, owner of San Francisco CrossFit and creator of Mobility WOD. And this was early on in his process. He posted a video every day on how you can increase range of motion and mobility, and he pulls me in the back and says, you gotta check this guy out. And he shows me this exercise called the couch stretch. You guys have a variation of it on your flyers there under the position, step 1 line there. But essentially, he has me get down on the ground, fold my leg up into a wall, open myself up. It's supposed to stretch out my hip flexors. It kind of hurt a little bit. I didn't know what I was doing. It didn't look anything like the guy that was in the video. I'm like, oh man, I don't know what I'm doing. It was kind of a little, you feel a little incompetent because you see this guy doing something amazing. You're like, oh, well, it is what it is. Anyway, about a minute goes by, and finally he's like, okay, Blaine, you can stand up. So I stand up, and all of a sudden my pelvis tucks under. And all the pressure from my back is relieved, my back pain goes away, and it was like seeing color for the first time. And that's when my life was changed. I was like, wait a second, you mean I don't just have to deal with this? Back pain, golf, they don't have to go together? There's a way that we can change the body so that we can now change the swing? And that's when I decided, okay, there's something more to be said about all of this. So down the rabbit hole we go. From that day on, I started reading as much as I could, getting certifications, going through as many workshops as possible. I became a CrossFit instructor myself. I became a Mobility WOD certified professional, got my PGA, started working down this whole route, got my TPI certification, and you name it, I became a fitness, health, and wellness fanatic, and it kind of started to change my life. So, at that time, I was teaching what I call traditional golf lessons, and at the same time, in parallel to that, I started coaching in some gyms across the country, first in the Baltimore, D.C. area, then down to Atlanta, and then back to the Baltimore, D.C. area. And I started implementing mobility programs at those gyms, because that's what I had seen with Dr. Kelly Starrett. He was big into the CrossFit world. I was like, okay, I can do something like that as well. So I started creating these mobility-minded cultures, and all my athletes started to move better with less pain, less injury. Their lifts went up, their times went down, everybody was feeling great. So then, I had the great fortune of working with a good handful of CrossFit Games athletes, getting to see how the peak performers in that world moved. I even worked with Laura Sturm in Atlanta. She's a 4-time world champion powerlifter. You would never guess it. The lady is really awesome. But it was really neat to see how elite athletes started to move. And so what happened was I started to incorporate this with my golfers. I asked them, hey guys, come out to these mobility programs I'm offering. I think you guys will really benefit from it. And sure enough, they started playing better golf. So I took my brand, my business, Mobilitas Athletics, and I changed it into Mobilitas Golf, where it is currently today. And you guys can find me on social media at Mobilitas Golf or on my website, mobilitasgolf.com. Now, I decided to take a leap of faith and move all the way across the country from the Baltimore, D.C. area out to Portland, Oregon, and I currently teach out of a facility just outside of Portland called Red Tail Golf Center. We have 15 full-time teaching professionals, we have 15 trackmen, we have 20,000 lessons per year that come through, and it was really the opportunity for me to get in front of as many people as I possibly could so that I could test out my philosophies on golfers and see, okay, if we go ahead and improve their mobility, will their golf also improve? And sure enough, it did. And now you guys all have this question in the back of your mind. What is mobility? This guy up here is talking about it, but he hasn't given us an idea of what it is. So there's a lot of different information out there of what it might be, but mobility is the balance between flexibility and control. If we're too flexible, we're going to feel loosey-goosey like Gumby. We're not going to be able to control our body. It's going to put stress on our spine, and that's not a good thing. We can't actually perform. Now, on the other side of the coin, where most people fall, especially males, I hate to say it, is they have too much control. We go into the gym, we see bodybuilding exercises, we look at magazines, we see what guys are doing on the tour, and they get into this big puff chest or shoulders come forward really strong, but then we go to swing a golf club and we're stuck. We can't move, and that also puts stress on our body. Now, the balance of flexibility and control doesn't mean to have neither of them. We have to have both of them. And a great example is as we get older, we lose our mobility. So typically senior citizens, we have the notion of I'm not mobile anymore. I can't move around the way I used to because I lose my flexibility and I lose my strength. Therefore, I lose my mobility. Now, mobility has essentially 3 components. At the bottom, we have range of motion. We have certain joints in our body that should be able to move to a certain degree, and we have muscles that connect them and connective tissues and so forth that allow that motion to happen. And once we have that range of motion, we need to be able to stabilize it and create strength around that system. But again, without losing the range of motion that we work so hard to get. And at the very top, we have the mind-body connection, which is the neurological side, which is the communication of the mind to the body, so that when you say, do this in your golf swing, your body says, okay, I can do that. And that's really where mobility comes from. It comes from the Latin word mobilitas, which means agility and speed and the ability to change. Or in other words, to be able to perform at any time, at anywhere, under any circumstances, to be ready. And we lose that. Now, mobility is expressed, again, in 3 different areas. We have our joints. That's typically where our range of motion is most warehoused, we'll call it. We have some very mobile joints, such as our shoulders, which can move in all sorts of different planes of motion, which we'll get to in just a second. But it's also in the muscles, where those muscles tie into our joints, how they connect with our connective tissues. Everything comes together, and our muscles could restrict that. So if you have, let's say, tight hamstrings, you're not going to be able to touch your toes. But at the same time, if you have a restricted hip socket, you won't be able to touch your toes. And it all plays together. And the last one is our nervous system. Again, we need to be able to communicate between the body and the mind. It's one thing to be able to have all these, but it's another thing to be able to use it. And that's what we're going to get to in just a second as we continue. Now, any good mobility program is going to take a spine-first approach, and this is really important to keep in mind. Our spine is the central part of our body, and everything about our body is designed around the spine to work from core out to periphery. And if we don't have a good spine, we're not doing anything. So if you have back pain, if you've ever thrown out your back, you know you're done. You have to wait for your back to recover, for the muscles to stop seizing, and that's a natural part of how we were designed. In nature, if we threw out our back, our body said, no, I'm going to shut down, you're going to recover, because if you make it worse, we're done. And so we have to make sure that this works together. And I use the analogy of a mast with a guy wire. Another analogy would be if you're setting up, say, a Christmas tree. You got to get all the bolts on just right from every side so that it's not crooked on one way or the other. But we have to have even tension going into the spine so that it's in a neutral position. Now the thing about a neutral position with the spine, as we can see, is it's not straight. The spine naturally has some curvature in it, our kyphotic and lordotic curves, which you don't have to remember, but just know that it's not straight. But when we stand straight, this natural curvature is present, and we need to make sure that things like the hips and the thorax, our neck and our shoulders aren't pulling those guy wires so that we're in different positions such as S posture, C posture, or anything that we see in the golf swing that might look familiar to you guys. Now, to really simplify how the body works, this is a concept borrowed from physical therapist Gray Cook and strength coach Mike Boyle. They were having a conversation one night, and Mike Boyle, the famous strength coach out of Boston, asks Gray Cook, well, how does the body work? What's your take on this? And Gray basically said, look, the body is made up of an alternating pattern of stable segments and mobile joints. And if that pattern is broken, pain and injury will follow. What does that mean? At the base, we have a foot. And our foot is made up of many joints, many muscles, many connective tissues, but it's a power source, it's a stability source. Its job is to grip and grab the ground so that you can move and alter what you're doing. And above it, we have our leg connected with the knee, which is also another massive power producer. In between those is a mobile joint, the ankle. Without the ankle being mobile, stress is put on the knee, the hips, the lower back, because they try to help out for the range of motion that the ankle is missing. And this pattern continues throughout the body. We're always changing between mobile and stable. And what makes a mobile joint mobile is its ability to move in multiple planes of direction. And that's where, say, the shoulder example comes in. Our shoulder can come up, it can come out, it can rotate, it can come back, and it should be able to transition between all of these with full range of motion freely without there being any kind of pain. Take the knee, for example. You might think, well, my knee is very mobile. It has a lot of range of motion. Yes, it does, in one plane of motion. There's a little bit of twisting involved. There's a slight bit of hyperextension and wobble side to side. But if we watch football on TV, Super Bowl's coming up, we always see one guy, he gets his knee blown in sideways, he goes down, and he's not coming back next season because the knee's not meant to move that way. Now, for our golfers, it's not quite as extreme, but it's a smaller micro trauma happening again and again and again because they have bad ankles, they have bad hips, their knees have a lot of pain, they go to walk the golf course, they hurt, they get done. My feet hurt, my knees hurt, my back hurts. We hear this all the time, don't we? That's because the mobile joints aren't working the way they're supposed to. And if we do it long enough, we have body problems, we have to get surgery, you name it. Now, where this plays into the golf swing. If we have somebody, let's say, who has tight hips, their hips can't bend forward or backwards, they can't rotate, they can't side bend. Well, what might happen is as they go into their golf swing, rather than getting into this beautiful position that we work so hard to see our golfers in, they sway off the ball. They stand up and lose posture. They come over the top. They lose their power, they lose their balance, they lose their stability. It comes from their missing mobility And because their mobility has been missing, no matter how many lessons they take, no matter how often they come to our courses to play, no matter what new club they buy, they can't use the correct movement patterns that we want to. It's just not there. Going back to my story in the beginning, it's like asking them to paint this beautiful picture, but they don't know what color looks like. And so you could tell them all these things in the Word, you could describe it to them, but until they see it, they're not going to be able to do it. And we have all sorts of different compensation patterns that arise from it. Now, just to clarify, one of these compensations may not necessarily be because of a restriction. And what I mean by that, everybody knows Freddie Couples, right? Freddie Couples' signature flying elbow way up top. It's not because his shoulder can't move. It's not because his wrist and hand can't move. It's because that's how he hits the ball. That's his style of swing. So in my world, what I do is I look at somebody who might have that flying elbow, and I test their shoulder, I test their wrist. If there's no restriction, I'm not going to touch it. I'm going to leave it, and I'm going to reinforce it, because that's how they hit the ball. I don't want to change that, because everybody has a different swing. If, however, you see somebody with a flying elbow, but they can't externally rotate the shoulder, red flag. They're doing it out of necessity, and they're going to get hurt. Now, we don't have to be a medical doctor, we don't have to be a physical therapist, but we should be aware that there are solutions out there, and we should be able to screen our players, and if we're not competent with fixing them, we should have a referral program and somebody in our network that we can send them to, whether that's in our own facility or you meet somebody outside of that network. So, what causes these imbalances? I hate to say it, you're all doing it right now. This looks really familiar, doesn't it? We all, whether we like to or not, spend a lot of time sitting. Now, our bodies have evolved for hundreds of thousands of years to adapt to the environments that they're in. This is the environment that we're in, and we adapt to it. Our shoulders round forward, our hips shorten and become tight, our spine is in a bad position, our neck is cocked back, and our body is craving stability, because if we go back to the spine first model, it's trying to protect the spine. And if we're in this rounded position, certain stabilizing muscles shut down, we can't quite control ourselves, and our body says, okay, well, if I'm here, I need to tighten up my hips, I need to lengthen and weaken my glutes and my hamstrings, and I'm just gonna stiffen up into this position. Show of hands, how many of you flew here to this conference this week? And how many of you drove? Well, a lot of driving. Anybody over 5 hours? 7 hours? 10 hours? Over 15 hours? How many hours did you drive? 20 hours. Anybody beat 20? And when you stood up out of the car, could you move? No. I'm sure we've all experienced that before. Our body adapts to that position. We get up and we're like, oh my God. And we all know it. We know if we get into a long car ride, we're not going to be able to move, and yet we do it for 40 plus hours a week every single day, and we've done it since we went into school. And then we ask our players to perform this complex movement that we call a golf swing, and we expect them not to get hurt. There's got to be a better way. So some of the most common imbalances that we see are called lower crossed syndrome and upper crossed syndrome. Lower cross syndrome is essentially an imbalance of muscles in the lower body where, because of mostly sitting, our hip flexors become short and they become tight. This triggers a biological response known as reciprocal inhibition, and you guys all know what that is, even if you don't know what that is. How many of you have done a bicep curl? All right. Why does a bicep curl work? Because when you contract your biceps, the opposing muscle group, your triceps, relaxes and turns off so that you can create motion. Otherwise, you just get stuck there. We can't control this, but we can exploit it. So, if we're sitting and our hip flexors become short and tight, the opposite muscle groups, our glutes and our hamstrings, they shut down and they turn off. When our glutes shut off, we lose control of our pelvis. And when our pelvis has no control, we need to keep our torso upright. How do we keep our torso upright? What do you guys think fires up and takes over to keep our body up? Our backs, our low backs in particular. And when our low back is firing up, the opposing muscle group, your abdominals and your core, they turn off. Now we're asking players to use the wrong muscles to make a movement that their body can't make, and we get hurt. Upper cross syndrome is essentially the same thing, but on the upper body, the thoracic area. Shoulders round forward, chest becomes short and tight, we lose control of our back, we lose shoulder stability, our neck fires up to hold our head into place, and we lose the ability to control our neck. So between this here and this here, we get stuck in this position. It's like we spend our entire lives leaning back and staring up at the stars. Not a good combination. Now there's good mobility and there's poor mobility. So let's talk about the difference. What does poor mobility look like? We all know this guy, Mr. Haverkamp. You guys are probably already thinking about somebody at your facility that reminds you of Mr. Haverkamp. Yeah, I got some laughs up here. We all know him. And what does Mr. Haverkamp want? He wants more distance. He wants to play better. He wants to play like he used to be able to play. But of course he can't. And if we're a golf instructor, sometimes we look at these players and we just think, man, I don't know what I'm going to do with it. We can put some Band-Aids on their swing. We can try to sell them a new club, but we think we're only going to get so far. But again, we know that there's a way around this. Now let's talk about good mobility. Which one of these is right? E, the yellow one?
Yellow.
Yellow. Got a couple of yellows. Anybody else? All of them. Each one of these guys wins multiple millions of dollars every year on the tour with a different swing because their swing fits their body. And each and every one of us is built differently. So to ask him to swing like him, he's not going to be able to play well. To ask one of you guys to swing like each other is not going to work. What we want to do is figure out how is that person's body supposed to move and build a swing for their body. And yes, that's going to change and evolve over time, but as long as we're consistent with it, we're going to be okay with that. But that's an understanding, like we said before, is it a compensation or is it a style trait on how they swing? If it's a style, reinforce it. If it's a compensation, we need to change it. Very important distinction. So this is my methodology, and I want you all to remember this, because whether you use my system or somebody else's, this is a very important hierarchy to remember. Position, rotation, transition. What does this mean? When we're incorporating mobility specific into golfers, we first need to be able to get in position to hit a shot. And we commonly call this posture. I call it position because our posture changes depending on the shot. We're not going to stand to hit a driver like we hit a chip shot or vice versa. We need to adapt to the surfaces, especially on uneven lies, weather conditions, you name it. But we need to get into position to hit that shot. Once we're in position to hit the shot, our body needs to be able to rotate. That's our backswing, that's our downswing, and in the middle is impact. And lastly, we want to work on transition, because while we might be able to have the range of motion to get into certain positions, we also need to be able to transition between them seamlessly under pressure at speed. And if we're just putting Band-Aid swings on our players, that falls apart. So I'm sure you guys hear this all the time. Maybe you've experienced it. You have a great lesson, or somebody at your club has a great lesson. They're hitting the ball really well. Then they go out to play, and it doesn't work. It falls apart. It works for a day, maybe two, but it doesn't stick. It's because we put a Band-Aid on their swing. We haven't truly given them the tools they need to be successful. And that's position, rotation, transition. You guys have a couple exercises here on your sheets to help you out with that, and I have more on my website and on social media. I post a free video every morning on Instagram and transfer it over to YouTube and Facebook, so check that out as well. So let's talk about them a little bit more. Position. For all these examples, we have a young gun, Mr. Ben Poland, semi-new to the tour. He's got some pretty good mobility, so we'll use him as an example. Now, whenever I'm looking at a student, in let's say 90% of the cases, I'm either going to look down the line or front on, and I'm going to draw the lines that you see right here on this screen. So if anybody wants to take a picture of that, that's great. I'll teach you how to use these. But what we do is we speed the camera up until right before they take the club away. I want to see if this works. Hey, that's even better. I want to see where their butt starts. I want to see from their ear to mid-hip to mid-knee to mid-ankle, and I want to see the angle of their club's shaft. On this side, I want to connect their right ankle to their right hip. I want to look at their left ankle straight up. I want to draw a waistline right about mid-groin, and I want to see their spine line. And these are going to be our reference points that we come to. Now, getting into position requires hip hinge, pelvic tilt. We need to stabilize our midline. We need a little bit of thoracic extension, and we need ankle dorsiflexion, or being able to pull your toes up in towards your shins, just to be able to get into that position. Once we're into that position, we can rotate. One of the big pieces with rotation is dissociation, or taking the upper body and the lower body and moving them independently from one another, creating what we in the industry call X factor, that great separation. That requires torso rotation, pelvic rotation, hip rotation, cervical rotation, shoulder rotation, forearm rotation, and length in our lats. And the thing about our lat muscles, you may have seen magazines or TVs or internet or whatever, they talk about training your lats, doing pull-ups and all these things to get your back stronger. But there's a small segment of our lat muscle that connects under and through the armpit into the upper arm. And when that becomes short and tight, we lose our ability to get our arm over our head. And when we can't get our arm over our head, we have a flat swing and we lose speed, and we might be able to get hurt and put stress on our shoulders. Now, when we look at Ben, we see that on this backswing, his right hip is right where it started. He did not sway off the ball. If he did, that tells me he's missing rotation of his hip, or he has a weak leg or a weak midline. His spine has also stayed the same. On the backswing, we have one additional new line. This green line here was drawn on his club shaft when his left arm or his lead arm was flat to the ground. And that creates what we call our slot. I know we've all heard that term before. The slot's the most efficient way for the club to come back down on the ball. So that's the difference between our address position and halfway back. And a lot of golfers I work with, actually, I tell them to stop right there. Because if we can't own that position, we shouldn't be going farther. Something interesting happens here, though, from this angle. His butt is behind the red line. Really important. Why do you guys think his butt goes behind the red line instead of saying on it? Right hip rotation. And it also has to do with pelvic rotation. What shape is our pelvis? Is it a circle? No, it's an ellipse. And because it's an ellipse, when it rotates around the center point, it actually goes backwards. So that's really important. So if you watch a golfer and their backswing, their butt is just touching the line where it started, they've actually moved forward. Unless they have a circular pelvis, and I haven't seen that yet. Lastly, we see that his head has basically stayed in the same position. It's still through the hip, basically through the knee. I'm okay with a little bit of movement there as long as it's not significant. And then lastly, we have our transition, which is moving in between these positions using balance, speed, power generation, and in between all that is impact. Now, Ben does have a slide. We see his left hip has gone beyond this red line. I'm okay with that because I've met Ben, I've screened Ben. He doesn't have a problem with his hips. That's just how he swings. So I'm not going to touch that. If I'm working with Ben, I want to just make sure that he's doing what he's doing it well. He still holds some pretty good positions here. His butt is still behind that line, again, because it's not circular, it's an ellipse. And just to give you an idea of the blue line, we don't have a transition picture here for it, but what I'm looking for on the way down is I want his hands to hit that blue line before the club does. If the hands and the club hit it together, I call that a belly flop, and that's where we cast the club, we lose a lot of power. It's typically a result of us coming out and over the top, in which case we have to cast it, otherwise we're going to get stuck, we're going to shank it, or something worse. So, in order to transition, we need a good sequence, which is pelvis first, followed by thorax, followed by arms, followed by our hands and club. We need wrist mobility to make up for any missing range of motion in the rest of our body. We need our balance, we need speed and power, and we need the ability to be precise and repeat this again and again. Now, why should you guys care about golf mobility? Well, mobility, regardless of the context it's in, is the common denominator for all athletic movement. Whether it's golf, whether it's working with CrossFit athletes, whether it's working with runners, swimmers, tennis players, anybody that we might run into at our facilities, mobility will make whatever they're doing better and easier. It doesn't change what you teach, it complements it. And this is a really important distinction. I don't want you guys to think that I want to change your teaching philosophy. I want to make you guys look like rock stars. I want your philosophy to work. Because if you've ever had a lesson, or if your pros have ever had a lesson where they're like, I just can't get that guy to do what I want him to, it's not you. I hate to say it, it's them. But it's both of us, right? Because now we have the tools to say, all right, but we can change that. And for the things that we can't change, we need to send them to a specialist. But we should at least be able to identify it. It also allows you to deliver high-value programs at your facility, whether it's individual, where you're charging more because you're incorporating things like a K-Motion vest, or if you're doing group sessions, that's great. You can do a community type approach. This is something we'll talk about in a minute that I've done and been very successful with, where you get 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 golfers together, and they feel more comfortable getting on the ground and rolling around and stretching, which is really great. And that creates a tribe, and people want to be at your facility, and they thank you for it. And lastly, it allows golfers to play longer, which means they're going to spend more time and money at your facility. Fantastic. That's what we all want. The benefits are you get to now deliver tour quality instruction. We take a look at the best players in the world. They're already working with a swing coach, a physical therapist, a nutritionist, a psychologist, maybe sometimes a short game or a putting coach. And if you deliver one extra notch in there, they're going to love you for it. And whether you do it yourself or you bring in a team and train everybody, that's awesome. And you can charge a premium for your programs, and it's going to increase your referrals and repeat customers, because people are going to come see you and be like, wow, they changed my life. You need to go see them, and now you're in. Lastly, it works. And we're going to talk about a couple of case studies I have for you guys on some people that have really helped. Right here, Henry Morgan, one of my all-stars. Henry Morgan, he's 66 years young. He spent most of his life working behind a desk. He loves golf. But when Henry came to see me, he could barely move. He was very, very limited. We did a TPI screen. If you guys aren't TPI certified, that's okay. Just know red is bad, yellow is and then green's where we want him to be. His driver club head speed when I met him was 53 miles an hour on average, and he only drove the ball 78 yards. And this is a guy that used to hit it over 200. He loved playing golf, and he was frustrated. He came to me and he basically said, Blaine, you're my last hope. If this doesn't work, I'm quitting the game. None of us want that. Let's see if this plays. How do we make this go? No, let's try this. All right, we'll come back to that. If I can get it to work at the end, we will. They're on my hard drive somewhere. But basically, to give you an idea, Henry's swing when we first started work together was this. That's all he had. He couldn't move his arms above his head, he couldn't rotate, he couldn't create speed. Everything was low left with just a snap hook, unless he just got his hands right, but that wasn't usually the case. So what we did, I taught him my power warm-up routine, which you guys are all going to learn at the end of this today so we can end our conference with some good mobility. He does it every single day religiously. Then I gave him a 1-week mobility program targeting his hips and thoracic spine, talking about pelvic toe touch, seated trunk rotation, and external rotation of his shoulders. And then we graduated into a 1-month program that backpacked on this, talked about more hip mobility, some glute activation, core activation, neck, all these other things. And then he supplements that with weekly lessons. He comes in about 3 times a month so that we can transfer that into his instruction and change his golf swing. And then he's also come to my academy program, which we'll talk about as well. And he came to one of my 8-week variations of that, which every night he has homework in addition to his plan. Now, here's Henry, when I saw him about 2 weeks ago before I came to the conference. What do we see is missing? All the red's gone. A couple months ago, Henry came up to me and he said, Blaine, you've changed my life. I'm retiring early. My wife and I are buying an RV, and we're going to travel around the country playing golf and hanging out with our grandkids. And he was about to quit the game. He now swings the club 85 miles an hour and hits the ball about 230, 240 yards total, including roll. It has changed his world. It's been so much fun to see. And again, we'll come back to his swing afterwards if we can get that pulled up. Here's some before and afters. Here was Henry when we first met, barely being able to squat, very rounded, couldn't get his arms up, his heels are coming off the ground, knees would cave in. Here's a mid-progress, and then here's the last time I saw him a couple weeks ago. Massive change in his ability to move, which has translated into his golf swing. And then on the other side here, I don't have a most current one, but this was back in August. We can see massive knee bend, huge rounding of the back, and now he's at least able to get down to his toes, and he continues to work on it every day. Now on the other side of the coin, this is Lance. Lance is the opposite side. When I first met Lance, he was recovering from a car accident, and he was really into stretching and mobility, but he didn't have the strength. So when I saw him, he's like, Blaine, something's just missing. I play golf all the time. I have the means to take lessons, and I'm a member at a country club, but I can't quite play the way I want to. And we see that he had a ton of green. It was great, but his red was in a couple really key areas. He swung the club 102 miles an hour, but he only got 220 yards of distance. So something was really missing. It wasn't translating. He wasn't able to control that club. Again, we'll see if we can come back to that video afterwards. So what did we do? Again, I started him off with my power warm-up routine, which he does every single morning. And it's really important that we do this every single morning because it creates a habit. And it reminds our body that we need to move beautifully so that we can play well. Now his training was a little bit different. We did a 1-month power program targeting his legs and core strength, followed by a 6-week speed program. And then we did a 1-month overall performance plan that he continues to cycle every 4 weeks or so. He also comes out, again, about every three to four times every month to take some lessons so that we can translate what we've been working on into his golf swing. Now, the red's gone. It's moving over into the yellow. He swings faster and his driver distance has improved a lot. This has been great for Lance because being 40 years old, you can't step up onto the tee, swing hard, and only go 220 yards. Not when your buddies are all headed near 300. So this is at least giving him a chance. He plays some better golf. He looks forward to going to the golf course as well. And we'll see if we can bundle up Oregon weather right there. It's great. Got some hardcore golfers out there. And then lastly, we have Claire Botts, another different side of the coin. Claire, in this picture, is only 12. She's since turned 13. But she's homeschooled. She loves reading. She's very eager to learn, and she's craving this social ability. So it's great that I'm able to bring other juniors in and create a little tribe of people who really want to learn how to move because nobody's teaching them this stuff. When I saw Claire, she couldn't touch her toes. She had bad hip mobility and she couldn't rotate her torso. She had a ton of yellow and she had a fair amount of green. Her driver total was about 140 yards, which all things considered isn't too bad for a 12-year-old. So I taught her the power warm-up routine. She came to my academy program for 2 sessions, and she also comes about twice a month for private golf instruction so that we can take it and she learns how to play and course strategy and all that stuff. Massive change. When we first started working together, I told Claire she was going to be able to touch her toes in a short amount of time. She laughed at me. She's like, there's no way, Blaine, I can't touch my toes. I haven't been able to touch my toes ever. My sister can't touch her toes. My parents can't touch her toes. Sure enough, look at that. She could barely touch her knees, and now she's way down there. Same thing with her squat. She couldn't get below parallel, she couldn't get her arms up, and now she has a really awesome squat. And we're still continuing to work on it. She doesn't quite have the strength yet, but we're working on that. You don't want to overload strength on somebody that young, but we're at least building that foundation. She no longer has any reds. She's mostly greens and has a couple of yellows. The overhead deep squat, we're really close. And again, the bridge leg extension is a strength thing, so we're not quite there, but it's getting close. And she's picked up about 30 yards on her driver. So now we have a 13-year-old. She's hitting the ball about 170 yards. She loves the game. This is the stuff that we need to have at our facilities. Speaking about your facilities, one of the things that I do are workshops where I come out to your facility, or this one, I happen to be partnered with a chiropractic facility up in the Portland area, and we teach people how to move better. We give you some practical advice and give you some drills and tips and tricks that you can take home and start to incorporate into your lifestyle. And the important thing is that you're doing it in a group setting, unless you have somebody who's already bought it. But most people, they want to have that accountability with somebody, do it along with somebody else, that they don't feel quite so awkward doing these things. And if you have a dedicated facility, that's great, but if you don't, no problem. For the last 2 years, my facility has been teaching off of a range mat, a little 6x6 space that we just work right on the range. It's been great, Because if you can do it there, you can do it anywhere. And I've been able to just say, all right, here's your spot, here's your spot, here's your spot. We do everything together. It's been really awesome. And usually we go out and play afterwards if it's a group thing. So to give you guys an idea, some of the workshops I've done are anywhere between 1 and 3 hours, depending on your needs and your facility. And we talk about, say, the big three are position, rotation, transition, give you a couple of tips and tricks that you can implement and how that affects your swing, and then just give them a little mobility one-on-one program that they can take home with them so that they can continue this conversation. Now, for those of you that want to implement a bigger program, and we want to talk about how this makes you some money, here's a great example. So let's take my 6-week academy program here. It's $1,000 per person, and they come for an hour twice a week. It comes up to 12 hours of instruction. Costs them $83 an hour. I'm making $500 an hour. It's a bargain for them, and it's less work for me, and I get to affect more people's lives in a shorter amount of time. And you can do this at scale. You can run a couple of these programs in tangent. I don't like to have too many people. I like to limit it to 6 players or less. But it teaches them how to move better. It gives them a community that they can then go out and play together and share those times on the golf course. Now, the way I structured it is basically if, let's say you charge $130, $150 an hour, you want to be somewhere nearer that half price. So if you normally charge $100 an hour, go into that 60, 65 an hour range, so it might work out to about $750, $850. But if you're a $200 an hour guy, great, charge $1,500 for this program. And again, you can tailor it depending on how many weeks it is. I have a 6, 8, and 10-week program as well, just depending on what we're working on. And then what happens is we work on things for 2 hours a week, so 1 hour twice a week, but everybody gets a binder and homework that they get to take with them so they can continue this conversation even when they're not around. Here's a couple pictures from some of the programs that I've done. I've gotten everybody some lime green shirts. They get some mobility tools that they can take home with them. We really make it fun, and people get to work together and get to see that change. Here's one that I've done in a gym setting. This was back in the days I was coaching in the CrossFit world before it became the golf world, but same idea. Let's create a community of people that don't mind going through this together so that they can improve their lives. Oh, back one more. Awesome. Then this has a couple of our juniors in there. I've taken it on the road to road shows like the Portland Golf Show, and now we're here at the Orlando PGA Show. And now I want to finish with the power warm-up, because we've been talking about all these things about mobility. You guys have been sitting around, and like I said from the very beginning, one of the big reasons that we lose our mobility is because of what we're doing right now. So we want to end the show right. We want to move around. We want to be able to go back out onto the show floor and do any final meetings with anybody. We want to go play some golf while we're here. But you guys can find this on my website, mobilitasgolf.com/fixit. You have a video that'll take you right through all this, so you can snap a picture. But the important thing is we do it every day for 2 reasons. The first is a morning body prep. If you do this every single morning, usually within the first few minutes of waking up, it sets the tone that you want to move beautifully throughout the day. It preps your muscles, your joints, your central nervous system, and it almost creates a meditative state because you're doing it again and again and again. The second purpose it serves is you do it first thing when you get to the golf course before you hit a golf ball. And this acts as a pre-golf priming sequence. It triggers your brain to go into that meditative state that you do every single morning and reminds your body, regardless of if I was at work all day or sitting in the car, I need to move beautifully. And it reinforces that. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, it's time to play some golf. It's time to move well. So I want everybody to stand up. If you're right next to somebody, we can get a little bit of room here. And we'll do our best to go through all these exercises, but it's going to take us about 5 to 10 minutes. I will be explaining it as we go, but this is going to be really great. You guys are going to be feeling awesome. All right, first things first. Left hand, grab your right wrist. Give it a good squeeze. Almost everything you got. Take your hand. We're doing 5 circles in each direction. Big and slow. You might feel some pops and cricks and grinds and noises. That's great. After 5, change directions. We're loosening up that wrist. Very important mobile joint in the body. After 5 each way, we switch sides. Give your other wrist a grab. 5 each direction. I hear mine going. I don't know about you guys. And then change directions. Now we're going to go to our feet. This is a little bit of balance work. If you need to hold on to something, go for it. We're going to stick one foot out, toe down, big circle, 5 each direction. I find it's easier to stare at a singular point than it is to just look around. It really helps with the proprioception. After 5, we're doing the same thing in the other direction. Again, popping, clicking, that's all great. That tells us that that joint is loosening up. 5 each direction, let's switch feet. Toe down, big circles. The bigger, the better. It doesn't have to be fast. I hate when people say, all right, I'm going to warm up my shoulders, I'm going to do arm circles, and we just start going really fast. It gets blood flowing, but it doesn't change the joint. 5 each direction with that foot. Next, we're going to do arm circles with a trap tack. What do I mean by the trap tack? We have this muscle called our trapezius. It runs from the neck down to the shoulder, down our back. And if you ever go to get a massage, they get onto your back, they need these big muscles out up here, and that's what we want to work on to free up the shoulder. So you're going to take 1, 2, maybe 3 fingers, find this meaty part of your neck and push down. You don't have to be exact. You'll be able to play around and find what's right for you. Take your free arm. It's going to hang by your side, arm nice and straight, up towards the ear, back, around, and down. Trying to keep the arm straight, and if you need to, you migrate your fingers around, and you'll feel the muscles moving and breaking up. It might feel a little uncomfortable at first. Use whatever pressure is appropriate for you. We're doing 5 backwards, and we do 5 forwards. Popping and clicking and grinding. Oh yeah, this is great. Now let's switch sides again. Right hand, left trap, push down, arms straight, 5 backwards. And then 5 forwards. So it's like giving yourself a massage. And I encourage you guys, look up this video when you get home, memorize it, incorporate it, tell it to everybody. Because again, I don't care if you're using it for golf or not. Mobility is universal. This is a great routine. Next, we're going to do arm power raises. Take your right arm, reach across your body, left hand on the elbow. I call this power stretching because we're going to use power. We're going to put power in to get power out. Now, the job of your left hand is to keep your arm from going farther away from your body. The job of your right arm is to try to go farther away from your body. It's called an isometric contraction. They're going to work together. So right arm pushes away, but your left arm doesn't go anywhere. Slowly, we're going to raise your arm up. Again, they're fighting each other. We go as high as our shoulder will allow us, still pushing away, and then we bring it down. We're going to go down all the way as low as we can. We're going to do that twice per side. Back up. If we want to get really into it, you twist your hand side to side while you're doing this. Be cautious with it. Some of your shoulders can't handle that. And then back down. Switch sides, left arm across, right hand on the elbow. Push that left arm away. We're going to raise up. And down. Let's go up again. And down. Great. Now, similar, this is called a diver's press. Both arms right out in front of you, left arm over your right. Turn your hands down, palms together. We're going to raise our arms above our head. So you're pinching your ears with your biceps. Reach tall, press your palms together. Big breath in. Hold it, squeeze it for a second. We're always reaching, always pushing. Let it go. Now rotate your hands so the blades of your hands are together. Still reaching tall, still pushing. Big breath. Let it go. Backs of your hands together. Big breath. Let it go. Blades of your hands. Reach tall. Palms of your hands. Again. Now my favorite part, big sweep backwards and down. How many of you had your neck pop? All right, one more time. Arms straight out, right arm on top this time. Palms together, going through one more. We switch which arm is on top because you'll notice as we're doing this, One of your shoulders likes to rotate, the other one doesn't. So we need to give them both a chance. Let's go blades together, always reaching, always pressing. Should never be painful, but it should always be a little bit beyond what you think. Back of your hands together. Blades of your hands together. Palms of your hands together. Big sweep down and back. Opens up the shoulders, opens up the neck, and now we get to do some side band distractions. So there's a couple ways that we can do this. If we can, we're going to take our right arm, put it behind our head with our hand on our back. If we can't do that, you can just put your hand behind your head. With your left hand, if you can get it on your elbow, great. If not, it can go on your forearm or it can go on your hand. But what we're going to do is holding the bent arm, in this case our right arm, in place, we're going to try to push it up. As you push it up, you're going to feel it stretch down the right side of your arm through the tricep. Lean left. That stretch now migrates all the way down the side of your body. Big breath. Hold it, squeeze it, push it into your ribs. Now here's the key. As you exhale, we're going to bend a little farther. Relax. Switch arms. We're doing this 2 times per side. Left arm is bent. Right hand on the left elbow. Drive it up. Bend to the side. Big breath. Squeeze it. Feel it stretch out the lat, the tricep, the ribs, the obliques. Let it go. And go to the side a little farther. One more time each side. Right arm behind, left hand on the elbow. Drive it up. Lean to the side. Big breath. And last time. Left arm is behind, right hand on the elbow. Drive it up. Lean to the side. Big breath. All right, now next we do have some flip down, so be careful. You might need to change where you're standing. I don't want anybody to hit their knuckles. I'll show you what it looks like. Both hands are going to come up. We're going to pull them down and flip your hands in the back, getting a little stretch in the front of the chest. It's going to look something like this. We're going to do 20 of these. The key here is that your chest stays tall. Don't let your body collapse as you do this. We're doing 20. We'll call this 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. All right, now some toe touch sky reach, 10 of them. Basically, we're going to bend down towards our toes. If you can't touch your toes, just go as low as you can. And then we're going to come up, lean backwards slightly, and squeeze your butt. We're getting the spine from flexion into extension. We'll just do 5 of these. I know there's not too much space here. We'll go down this. We'll call this one 3. Back down. Again, if you can't get to your toes, no worries. Just do what you can. And we'll do 1 more. Awesome. Now, we get into some fun stuff. Hips, my favorite. We've probably all done some kind of trunk twist before. And that gets our thoracic spine moving. It gets our neck moving. This is going to tie in the hip, and it's going to tie in the ankle and the knee as well. If you have knee problems, keep your knees soft. If you have no knee problems, feel free to lock them. But if it feels discomforting, soften them up. This will make sense in a second. Eyes are always going to stay forward. We're going to twist towards our right, keeping that right leg straight or slightly bent, and twist into that leg. And then when we go left, we're going to twist into the left leg. Twist into the right leg, twist into the left leg. Again, if you have bad knees, keep your knees soft. Eyes always stay forward. That gives us cervical rotation as well. You're getting cervical rotation. You're getting thoracic rotation, hip and pelvic rotation, ankle rotation. Again, if your knees can handle it, keep the leg locked of the foot that you're twisting into. Let's do a few more. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1.
When you do those, do you keep the off foot completely flat on the ground?
Great question. You could, but you don't have to.
Okay.
So if you're twisting and your front foot comes up, kind of like our golf swing onto the toe, that's totally fine. If you're able to keep it down and still get the same stretch, go for it as well. But either one is fine because we're mainly working the side we're twisting into This is just a reaction of where we're headed. Great question. All right, one of my absolute favorites, a little sling twist. Again, use something for balance if you need to. I'll demonstrate one first. Right leg comes up, we give it a hug. We send it behind us. It stays as straight as possible. Chest stays up, drop our hips down, twist into our front leg, and reach up and over. I know that's a lot going on at once. It helps balance, it helps hip mobility, you name it, it's all together. We'll just do two. I know it says four, we'll just do two. Everybody take your right leg, bring it up, give it a hug. If you can't give it a hug, just raise it and lower it. That's totally fine. Send it behind you. The farther behind you it goes, the bigger the stretch is going to be. Again, work within your body. Chest stays up, hips drop down. You should feel a stretch in the front of your right leg. Your butt is squeezed, your heel's driven into the ground. Twist towards your front leg, your left leg. Take your right arm and reach up. Big breath. And let it go. Come back to center. We're going to explode up. If you can catch your balance, awesome. I'm telling you, it ties it all together. And there are variations on how we can do this. Just shoot me an email. Give it a hug. Send it on back. One more time. Hips go down. Twist. Raise up and over. Big breath. Let it go. All right, back to center. This time, left leg up. We give it a hug. Again, if not, just raise and lower. Send it behind you. Hips go down. Twist into the right leg. Your butt's always squeezed. Reach up and over. Big breath. Back to the center. Explode up. Give it a hug and back down. Now remember, guys, if you do this every morning, get really good at it. Back down. We twist. Arm over. And let it go. Awesome. We have one left to go. These are dynamic power squats. Again, work within your range of motion. We're going to take our leg like we did before. Let's start. We'll do all things the same. Right leg up. We give it a hug. This time, left leg stays straight as we drop down into a squat. The leg then straight, in this case our left leg, push that foot through the floor. You're going to feel the inside of your leg fire up. Then we explode back up, give it another hug, back down, pushing that straight leg through the floor. And then two on the other side, leg comes up, drop down, push through the floor, back up, give it a hug, and down, push it through the floor. Now we can stand up, we can shake it out. We're all feeling tall. Chests are big, hips are tucked under, our shoulders are back. We're now ready to perform. And if we do this every day when we wake up, we set the tone to move beautifully. There's one last piece to all of this. I'll just give you a little bit of my information. The last piece is there's now a window of opportunity that we have to exploit. If we do this and then just sit down, it does us no good. If we do this and then we tell our bodies to move the way we want them to, whether it's right before a golf lesson, whether it's before we go to exercise, whether it's before we go to cook breakfast or move around, whatever it is, if you now tell your body, because your muscles, your joints, your nervous system are primed, you say, this is how I want you to move, your body's craving that information. It's going to soak it up, it's going to take it in, it's going to remember it. This window of opportunity is the secret to making the changes that I have to my players' golf swings, and I hope you guys do the same. Thank you so much for coming out. I'll be sticking around for any questions. Please feel free to shoot me an email at any time. You guys have my information. You have a couple stretches you can use as well. Thanks so much for coming out.